You to take me back to the night of September 7th, 1996, the night that Tupac Shakur was shot and died 2 days later. How long had you been a police officer at that time?
That was 96, so I started with Metro in 88. So
Okay, so you've been around for a while.
Yeah, and I did 2 years in San Diego before that. So I'd had 10 years on.
So you're a seasoned cop. You've been around for about a decade. You start your shift that day just like any other day?
Well, it wasn't quite just like any other day because so what I did at the time, I was a bike sergeant on the strip. So when you're a sergeant, you generally have a group of about 12 officers that work for you. And both me and the whole squad are on bicycles assigned to the strip. A lot of people, when I say bike, they think motorcycle. We're talking
Bicycle, yeah.
Yes, we're talking about
They still do that today.
bicycles here.
Yeah.
I never see them around down there anymore. But anyways, so that night was a Mike Tyson fight. So anytime Mike Tyson was fighting, it was anything but a normal night. He brought with him, well, I can't say he brought with him, but he attracted an extremely large and not such a polite crowd. It was always
a criminal element.
Yes, there was definitely an element here. One of the things it is the Super Bowl of Pimp and Hoe nights. So I mean, everybody's out there showcasing their wares and
kind of like NBA All-Star Weekend here.
Very much like NBA All-Star Weekend. So there was a lot going on. So even before this whole thing had started.
All right, so you're prepared. You're prepared.
We know it's going to be bad. And it's kind of funny because while the fight is actually taking place, the world stops. Nothing happens anywhere while the fight's in progress.
And by the way, it wasn't in progress for very long.
Yeah, exactly. It was a one-rounder.
All right. So you're a cop. You've been doing this for 10 years. You're prepped that, hey, there might be a little bit more of a criminal element in Vegas this weekend because there's a Tyson fight. So your shift starts at what time?
Oh gosh, it was swing shift, so I started at 3 o'clock.
Okay, so you start at 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Right.
What is the first call then you received that there was a shooting?
Okay, so this is so we're moving up to the shooting is after the Mike Tyson fight, so we're jumping several hours ahead. It's I don't know the exact time, 11 o'clock ish.
And what was that call? What did you hear?
Here's what happened. So when police talk on the radio, we can all hear each other talking, and then there's a dispatcher as well. So I heard two guys that were bike officers. So we had two squads of guys working that night because there's Saturday night double coverage. So I heard two guys, and I know their voices, come on the radio, and they yell, "Shots fired," at the corner of Koval and Flamingo. So they were in a parking garage, a few floors up in the parking garage, in what used to be the Maxim. I think it's the West End now?
Yeah.
But so they're in the parking garage. They put it out over the air, and they say there's an entourage of cars fleeing from the scene. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't actually come out as a call where someone calls in or dispatch gives it to you. It comes out with these guys, with these other cops hearing it. So it's a real-time incident. There's literally no time has passed. So this is happening right now. So it takes them a little bit of time to get down to the street because they've got to do the circle around the parking structure to get back down there. So you've got a convoy of say maybe six cars or so, 7 cars that are leaving the scene and heading, and if you're not familiar with Vegas, this won't mean a lot, but heading westbound on Flamingo, which is towards the Strip.
Because my understanding is the shooting happens at around 11:15, and Suge Knight is driving the car, Tupac is the passenger, and
Correct.
Right after the shooting, he doesn't call 911, he doesn't take Tupac to the hospital, he's following the car where shots came from. Is that correct?
Well, no one knows where the shots came from exactly.
Assuming.
You know what?
Making that assumption.
That story has changed several times, but
Yeah.
As the cars are leaving, and here's the thing, we don't know, as the cops, which car is shooting who. All we know is that there's a shooting, and all these cars are fleeing from the scene, but we don't know where the shots came from.
Yeah.
And neither do the guys that are that were actually there and heard the shots. And
Understood.
Saw the cars.
I understand that. I understand we don't know exactly what happened.
Right.
Based on a lot of evidence, it appears as though that probably happened. So you hear that. on the dispatch
Right,
at around 11:15, around that time, give or take a minute or two.
Right.
And what do you do after that? I would imagine you head towards the scene, right?
So I'm heading towards the scene. So I'm down near the MGM, which is on the Strip, and I start immediately heading northbound to catch up to get up to Flamingo, because that's where it's heading. So they get to Flamingo. They get to the Strip from Flamingo. They hang a left. So now they're heading south. I'm heading north. We're just literally heading towards each other. And they're in pursuit. They can't quite keep up because they're on bikes and they're chasing cars. So they fall behind a little bit, but they're still able to put out a direction of travel. So as I'm heading north, I'm kind of thinking, how am I going to stop these guys? They're already running from the police.
And by the way, you have no idea who is in the car.
Absolutely no idea.
You have no clue that you are talking about arguably the most famous rap artist ever.
I have no idea.
No idea what you're getting yourself into.
Nothing.
Right.
I have no idea. I have no idea who's in the cars, anything. So as they're heading towards me and I'm heading towards them, we meet up. We're all still rolling. We meet up at Las Vegas Boulevard in Harmon. Right now, that would be the front of where City Center, where Cosmo and all that is. Of course, that wasn't there yet. That street was a T-bone. So when you came to the Strip from Flamingo, you either went left or right. You couldn't go straight. So they turned left, and as they're heading southbound, and we meet up at Harmon. And if I said City Center was on Flamingo, I meant to say Harmon.
Yeah, I got you.
So
you're on Harmon and Flamingo.
Harmon and Las Vegas Boulevard.
I'm sorry, Harmon and Las Vegas Boulevard.
So a long time, what was there? Most people know that intersection as the Harley Cafe was there for, 20 years, maybe even more. So most people would know it as the Harley Cafe.
And when you're approaching one car, right, the car that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tupac and Biggie, that's the car that you approach, right?
Well, here's what happened. So they try to hang a left on
Did
Carmen.
I say Biggie? I'm sorry. Tupac and Suge.
Suge.
Yeah.
Well, Suge is big, so
got
it's
my
like,
rap
it's
artist
easy.
confused there for a second.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they go to hang a left in Harmon. They're going too fast to make the turn, and they've got two tires that they've blown out by slamming into a curb when they were fleeing the scene. So between having two tires on the right side of the car blown out and trying to make that left-hand turn onto Harmon, they just can't do it. So they spin out. So they spin out. They're literally in the middle of the intersection. And all the other cars are too. So everybody comes to a stop. Now, this happens right as I'm kind of sliding in on my bike. I laid the bike down and came sliding in. And so it's not really a matter of me getting to them. We run into each other.
Gotcha.
So we're right there. So I hopped off the bike.
And you're the first officer on the
I'm
scene.
alone. I'm the sergeant. So
Wow.
the sergeant generally rides alone,
You're the
and
first one there.
everybody else.
And you have no idea what's going on.
No
You
idea.
hear that there might have been a shooting, shots fired, and you don't know what you're dealing with.
Right, and there's two other bike cops that are chasing these guys.
Which
and,
is very dangerous. You don't know what's going on.
Oh, it's a terrible mess, and you know what? In the fact that it's right in the middle of the Strip, and in fact, one of my first thoughts was, this is going to be a shootout. I thought in my mind, for sure it's a shootout, and it's going to be in the middle of the Las Vegas Strip, and I'm going to be in so much trouble that I can't even think about it, that I got into I started a shooting in the middle of the Strip, but it's just happened to be, it'd be great if these things happen out in the middle of the desert, but it is where it is. So I pulled out my gun, started yelling. The doors open, and everybody gets out of their cars, and they're just kind of standing there.
And when you say everybody, you're talking about Suge and Tupac.
Not Tupac.
No,
not
he's still
Tupac
in the
yet.
car.
He's still in the car.
But Suge is the first person that gets out of the car.
Suge has gotten out, and there's 7-8 other guys there, part of the entourage, and
So
the other cars.
there were people in other cars following Tupac and Suge.
In front and in back of them.
Wow.
So, which I don't think anybody's made clear exactly how that train of cars makes sense. I still don't know the full deal.
So these were their entourage.
Exactly. It's an entourage of guys, say maybe 7-8 guys, 6 cars.
Suge gets out of the car first. Do you recognize him? Do you know who he is?
No, I have no idea. Everybody kind of gets out at the same time.
Okay.
So I'm waiting for the shooting. I'm pointing my gun at everybody. I'm yelling at them to get on the ground so I can kind of control the situation. And I can tell right off the bat, these are kind of like hardcore dudes. These aren't just your average citizens getting out. I was like, all right, these are some pretty rough guys. So I'm yelling at everybody to get down on the ground. And there's kind of sort of compliance and sort of not. They're kind of like looking at each other. Some of them get down, some of them don't. And you could tell there's this little very uncomfortable setting of, do we listen to this guy? Do we not listen to this guy?
While all this is going on, Tupac is close to taking his last breath.
Tupac
still in the car.
is in the car. So right then, while I'm trying to keep my eyes on everything and everybody, I notice there's one guy still sitting in the car. Nobody else.
You see him sitting in the car?
I see him sitting in the car. And I'm like, okay, this is the guy that's going to shoot me.
Right.
Because, he's not, I can't see what he's doing. I can't see his hands. He could have a machine gun sitting on his lap for all I know. So I point my gun at him, yelling at him to get out of the car. He doesn't move. So I walk up to the car, gun in right hand, grab the door handle with my left hand. And I could see right when I got up to the car, right around the door handle, there's bullet holes like all around it, a very tight grouping of bullet holes. The window is shot, and the side window is shot, and the windshield is shot too on the side, next to the post. So a lot of bullet holes. So I go to pull open the car. I couldn't get it open at first, and I think what had happened is those shots had somewhat disabled the mechanism of the door handle. So I'm pulling on it. I'm yanking on it, and I finally am able to get the thing open. It pops open. Well, when it pops open, Tupac, now mind you, I don't know he's Tupac yet, he was leaning against the door. So as soon as I open the door, he kind of falls out with the door. He slumps right out with the door as I open it. So I grabbed him with my left hand and I just kind of, took him down to the pavement, just brought him down to the pavement while he's in my arm. And I could see right away, it was very apparent this guy was in bad shape. He had multiple torso shots. I couldn't tell where, there's so much going on. There's a lot of blood. He's wearing a lot of jewelry, and there's so much blood. And with the gold jewelry, I could already see the blood is starting to coagulate in the jewelry, and he's bleeding out of his mouth and nose. And I was like, oh man, this guy he's probably not going to make it. So I took him down. Well, about then, Suge Knight comes running up. And Suge had been shot in the side of the head. Mm-hmm. A lot of people said lately, and I read, he caught a fragment. I don't think it was a fragment. I think he took a whole round to the side of the head. And what had happened it is a big cement head, apparently. Yeah. But the bullet penetrated his scalp, but it didn't penetrate his skull. So he's literally shooting blood out of the side of his head. And he's acting like nothing happened. He's not touching his head. He's not saying I'm hurt. He's not doing anything. He's yelling at Tupac, and he's yelling at him, "Pac, Pac." And Tupac is looking back at him, and they're trying to communicate, but Tupac can't get a word together. He's hurt too bad. So Suge Knight comes right, like he's coming up on my back, and this guy is, he's like 6'8", 400. He's a mountain. And my first thought is if this guy jumps on my back, I'm in trouble. It's going to be a bad scene. So right when he'd come up on me, I'd point my gun at him, tell him to get away from me, and he kind of would. He'd back off. He'd put his hands up and back off, but he's still trying to yell at Tupac. So it's about then when I asked Tupac, who shot you? Who did this? So most people who are murdered know who their murderer is. So it's a good question to ask if you get that opportunity. So I'm trying to ask him what happened, who shot you? And he's just kind of really ignoring me. He's just looking past me, and he's looking at Suge Knight, who's yelling at him. So, and he's kind of squirming. He's trying to look over, and all. This goes on for. It's hard to put a time on this type of thing. I don't know, 10, 20 seconds maybe. And all of a sudden, just in the snap of the fingers, he changed, and he went to silent and still. Just like, it kind of reminded me if you see like a marathon runner, they're trying, and all of a sudden something, bam, they hit the wall, and they're like, nope, can't do it, can't move. And he had just kind of crossed over into that, I give up trying to yell. So he goes, he's still conscious, still looking at me, he's still breathing. And so I looked at him, and now he's looking in my eyes, and for the first time he's paying attention to me, which he hadn't been doing. So I looked at him, and I go, who shot you? Who did this? And he started sucking in air like to get a breath together, and he's looking at me, and I'm like, he's actually going to tell me something. So he's getting his breath together, and I looked at him, and he kind of pulled his head back and looked at me, and he said, "F you." I cleaned it up a little bit there for you for the TV, but yeah, said F you. And as soon as he said it, he started coughing, blood's coming out of his mouth and nose, his eyes roll back, and he slipped into unconsciousness. So as it turns out, that would be the last thing he ever said in his life. So within a couple minutes, ambulance gets there, and he's immediately intubated. You know, they're sticking tubes down his throat. Go ahead.
I don't want to interrupt you, but I wanted to ask you this. At that time, when you're talking to him, did you figure out who it was?
Yes,
You did?
but I did because real high-end car, all tricked out, high-end BMW, the jewelry, Suge yelling at him, pack, pack. Now, with that said, I don't really know anything about him. All I know is there's a rapper named Tupac.
So before we go to when they put him in the ambulance and all that, here you are in the middle of one of the biggest tourist destinations in the world, right? You're on Harmon and Las Vegas Boulevard. You've got Tupac's entourage all over the place. You have no idea where the shots came from. Could be somebody there. You have no clue.
Absolutely.
You have Suge, who you said is 6'8", huge guy, bleeding profusely from the head. You're trying to get him away from you, while you basically have Tupac, who you now recognize in your arms, struggling to breathe, going into unconsciousness, saying his last words to you, which are F you, when you're trying to, which is pretty gangster, by the way.
Yes.
I'm not condoning it, but...
Yeah, we can talk about that later, too.
Pretty gangster. I mean, this is like something from the movies, and you're in real life, and you're the first officer on the scene. Are there a lot of innocent bystanders getting out of their car, too? Are people recognizing at all what's going on?
I don't think so, but I'll say this. So Suge comes running up on me again, and I look back at him, and for the first time, I notice there's another bike cop there. And he's literally got his hands in Suge's chest, and he's pushing him back. And this is the first time I'm like, thank God I'm not here alone.
Right.
I didn't even see where these guys came in because, you know, like you said, the scene is a mess. There are people on the sidewalks and stuff. I mean, it's a strip on Saturday night. And this is before we had pedestrian bridges as well. So you got people just all over the place, people crossing the street, people looking, people yelling, and it's chaos.
Let me ask you this, because these were the last words that Tupac said in his life. As you mentioned, he goes into unconsciousness. He dies 2 days later. Do you feel like in that moment where you're making that, I guess you could say, eye connection with Tupac, and he finally notices that you're asking him a question, do you feel like there was any possibility at all where he was thinking in his head, while he's in a lot of pain, that he might have told you, that he was contemplating telling you who shot him? Was there any chance that, because he knew, right? Do you believe
I have to think he knew. I mean, these
Yeah.
shots came from like literally 3 feet away.
Right.
You know, when you see the bullet holes in the side of the car, especially the ones near the door handle, the grouping is you could cover it with a teacup. I mean, you would have to be either the best shooter in the world or you're right there. You're
Right.
standing right there. I got to think he knew who shot him.
Do you think there was a moment where he was contemplating telling you, or that he was never going to tell you?
I don't think he had any intention of telling me. I also don't think, and of course this is, we don't know for sure, I don't think he knew he was going to die. He'd been shot before. I think in his mind, he's been shot before. He's been, you know, now he's shot again, and he just didn't, I think he was a guy that probably didn't like the police, and he didn't like me talking to him. And right then, while, you know, he's got to be in pain, and he's trying to get a breath together, and, you know, nothing's as horrible as when you can't get a breath, when you need a breath. And I think it was just easier to look at me and say what he said
Right.
than try to really go anywhere
And
else
at this
with
time, Suge Knight is calling out his friend.
Yes.
He wants to know his friend's okay.
Yes,
which
yes,
clearly-
he's very much concerned.
Which, listen, I understand that. You're freaking out. You're hallucinating. You know, if I have a family member or friend that is shot, I want to know what's going on. So I don't blame Suge for doing that. At that moment, he's bleeding from the head as well. Okay, so he literally goes into unconsciousness. You said his eyes roll up seconds after he says "F you" to you. Was
Right.
it seconds?
Seconds.
Then what happens after that?
So he's intubated. I grabbed one of the guys that worked for me. I'm like, hey, ride in the ambulance with this guy and Suge in the same ambulance. And in case something happens, he says, I'm pretty sure he wasn't going to say anything, but you never know. So he grabbed another cop. So we got 2 cops now, Suge Knight and Tupac, all in the same ambulance. So they go off to UMC Trauma. UMC Trauma is, at the time and probably still is, one of the best trauma centers in the country. I mean, if you got shot, that's the place you want to be.
Right.
So they get him there, and I had later talked to some medical people, and they said, well, for all practical purposes, when he got there, he was dead. Because they are a high-level trauma unit, they get his heart going again. But he never regains consciousness.
So his heart did stop on the way to the hospital?
I think they're doing CPR the whole ride.
Yeah.
They're doing CPR the whole ride. So they get him there. They take him right into surgery, which they can do right there in the trauma center, like real time action. And they are able to keep his heart.
And are you there? Do you go?
No.
Okay.
I never go to the hospital.
Yep. You
So
stay on the scene.
I'm still out on Las
And they
Vegas
took
Boulevard.
Suge and Tupac in the
Yes.
same ambulance?
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm out of the scene. So we've got all these other guys now. The situation is calmed down, and that takes a while because it's a complete mess.
And you're still trying to figure out, well, wait a second, where did the shots come from?
Right. We have no idea where the shots came from. We get all the guys there patted down, sitting on the side of the road and everything. It's a complete mess because you got to remember, this is also completely stopped traffic both ways in the middle of the Las Vegas Strip. So the whole strip is gridlocked at a standstill. These cars aren't going anywhere. It's now a homicide scene in the middle of the intersection. So pretty much nobody was going anywhere for hours to come. So I've got to try to get that mess cleaned up, and by now we're getting more cops there helping things out. We've still got a potential crime scene, I should say, over where the initial shooting occurred. That's got to be addressed. So there's a lot going on. So most of what I was doing at that point is we're trying to talk to the other guys that were there. And this is one of the things that's always frustrated me a little bit is so we've got all these guys there. Nobody saw anything. Nobody's got anything to say. I think, matter of fact, I heard one of the guys say, and this is common, especially amongst gangsters, we take care of this stuff ourselves. So that, I think, was their state of mind, and I think that was probably Tupac's state of mind as well. We take care of this stuff ourselves.
So you have, 7 or 8 of his people
Right.
that were driving in front of him and behind him, and you're questioning all of them. You're trying
Yes.
to find out, because obviously they all saw the shooting.
Oh, there's
Yeah.
no way they couldn't.
Obviously they all saw it, and pretty much every single one of them, like you said, they're saying, we take care of it ourselves. Gangster code, I guess you could say.
Yes,
and,
absolutely.
Because they all know who did it.
You know what? And if they, and I'm kind of even, I'm going out on a little bit of a limb like this. At a certain level, I get it. We take care of it ourselves. I get it. I don't agree with it. I don't support it, but I understand it a little bit. But here's the problem. 10 years later, they're all on TV saying, yeah, Tupac's killer was never caught because the cops wouldn't help us. They wouldn't do anything.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, if you want to you take care of it yourselves, then I guess you've made that choice. Don't come back 10 years later and say we couldn't get any help.
Well, that's ridiculous.
So,
that's completely
and that's what happened. So a lot of those guys, including Suge, came down to homicide the next day for questioning. Now I wasn't there for that, but I've talked to those guys, obviously those cops, and it was pretty much the same thing. There was maybe a little bit of information given, but pretty much no one
Suge
gave
knew
a
who did
name.
it too.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Suge had to have known who did it. As
Oh,
well.
he had
Because
to.
my understanding is they had some sort of minor physical altercation at the fight hours earlier.
Okay, yes, and
And
that's
I had heard a rumor, and you can tell me if this is true or not, because you certainly know a lot more about this than I do, but it was something around the length of the gold chain that Tupac was wearing. It was something about jewelry that he was wearing, and this guy Anderson gets into some sort of physical altercation with him hours earlier. Is that true?
It's all true.
Yeah.
So, in fact, it's on video.
Yeah.
So, what had happened hours before, this is before the fight.
Right.
People in Tupac's entourage, they see Orlando Anderson in the MGM. Well, Tupac and Anderson hate each other so badly that they decide, okay, let's go over there and kick his ass. He's on the other side of the hotel, but we're going to go over there and deal with him. Now, supposedly, and this is, kind of hearsay on my behalf, this beef had started with them because Orlando had robbed Tupac at gunpoint and taken one of his necklaces, a medallion that was a death row medallion. I cannot say whether that's true or
Wouldn't
not, but
surprise me.
that was the word.
Yeah.
Oh, and Orlando Anderson, I mean, this is a bad dude, full-time bad guy. Everybody knew he was a shooter, a robber, everything you could think of. So the fact that like he had robbed Tupac is hardly a big stretch. That probably did happen. So when they find out this guy's, hey, Anderson's in the hotel, they go over there and 7-8 guys just commence to whipping his ass right there in the middle of the hotel.
And I think what I want to talk about now is a little bit. We're going to take a quick break, but what I want to do, and by the way, if you're just joining us, we're speaking with former retired Metro Police Lieutenant Chris Carroll, who was the first person on the scene of the Tupac shooting, telling the story. And another reason why we're talking to Chris is because, well, the Tupac Shakur investigation is heating up a little bit here, because in Henderson, a man's home was searched, and a search warrant was issued in regards, Metro Police have confirmed this, in regards to the Tupac Shakur shooting. So what I want to focus on now with Chris, after we take a break, I want to talk a little bit more about Orlando Anderson and have you continue to talk about that. And the link to Orlando Anderson and the man's home that was searched in Henderson. There is a link. So we're going to talk about that and what he knows about Anderson. And I also want to get into maybe the days, weeks, months, and even years after this, because this has lived in your head since that night. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. Again, if you're just joining us, he's Chris Carroll, retired Metro Police Lieutenant. Tupac Shakur's last words ever were in Chris's arms. It's really wild. It's crazy. So we'll take a quick break. We'll continue this conversation on the other side. You're listening to Pushing the Limits right here on KSHP.
Hey everybody, are you struggling to find a pizza place that reminds you of Brooklyn? That true blue New York style pie? Well, worry no more. Stallone's Italian Eatery Pizza is a knockout. We're located at 467 East Silverado Ranch Boulevard, just off of Premium Road, half a mile east of South Point Casino, just minutes from the Las Vegas Strip. Come by and grab a slice of pie. Plus, check out our Brooklyn-inspired Italian cuisine. Our sandwiches are super. Hero, that is. Because why be a sub when you can be a hero? Stallone's Italian Eatery is here to serve you phenomenal food, Vegas. Forget about it.
Expert in the industry and community. My name is Blake Wynn. You may recognize my name as my grandfather was the best governor the state of Nevada has ever had. Growing up in Las Vegas, I've come to know this community intricately. Now, I am raising a family here as well. So I understand all the issues impacting our home and quality of life. As the top realtor for the #1 real estate team at Keller Williams, you can have confidence in my experience, knowledge, and track record. When it comes to buying, selling, or investing in real estate, choose a name you can trust and someone who understands the community you call home. Call Blake Wynn today and experience the difference of a trusted expert. 702-540-3311.
Sapphire Pool and Day Club, the world's only topless gentlemen's day club, introduces its 2023 pool season lineup with a bevy of beauties and social media celebrities throughout the summer who will all host alongside hundreds of Sapphire's topless poolside entertainers. Enjoy brunch in the sun with items like frittata-style omelets, stripping chicken, and French kiss toast before washing it down with signature summertime cocktails. 10 lines beware. Go Bear! Ladies are welcome to go topless within the day club for the ultimate party. Guests can purchase affordable day bed packages, cabana packages, lounge chairs, and more. The best part though? Pushing the Limits will be broadcasting shows every other Friday throughout the pool season with a ton of surprise celebrity guests. Wow! Reserve your spot now. For more info, visit sapphirepoolLV.com or call 702-869-0003. That's 702-869-0003. See you at Sapphire.
Hey everybody, it's Brian Shapiro from Pushing the Limits. I want to tell you guys about Sahara West Urgent Care and Wellness. They're conveniently located on the southwest corner of Sahara and Jones. They're open Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. and Saturday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. At Sahara West Urgent Care, they'll take care of all your healthcare needs. They offer routine services such as physicals, STD testing, car accident treatment, and work injuries. You name it, they do it. They have on-site x-ray, EKG, ultrasound, and labs. They treat chronic conditions such as asthma, blood pressure, diabetes, and more. They also offer general wellness exams, treatments such as testosterone enhancement and cancer screening. They're located on Sahara, 6125 West Sahara Avenue. Their number is 702-248-0554. And the best part, they accept most major insurances and affordable cash pay prices, office visits starting at just $95. And I'm also a client, so please give them a call, 702-248-0554.
The Radio Shopping Show is heard right here on KSHP North Las Vegas, AM and FM, 829 6HP North Las Vegas, and KSHP.com.
All right, welcome back. It is Pushing the Limits on a Wednesday. I want to tell you guys about my favorite gaming bar in town, Jackson's Bar and Grill, located at Flamingo and Jones. By the way, officers eat for free there. Brian Slipok and his wife Robin are wonderful people. Every Monday and Wednesday, today is Wednesday, if you hit 4 to the Royal, you get to spin a wheel to win up to $3,000. Great food, great atmosphere. Please check them out, Jackson's Bar and Grill. If you're just joining us, we are speaking with retired Metro Police Lieutenant Chris Carroll, who was the first officer on the scene of the Tupac Shakur murder. In fact, Tupac's last words in Chris's arms were "F you." We just found out. We just learned, and Chris joins us in studio. We were just talking about like the car that Tupac was sitting in. That today, in my opinion, would have been sold for tens of millions of dollars, and they just recreated another BMW in the car using the motor, I guess, and switched everything out, which was financially probably not a good decision.
No, I mean, that car, we can only imagine what it could have brought at an auction. And somebody, and I don't know who, but they fixed everything up. You know, they put new doors on it, new wheels and everything. They turned it into just another BMW.
Not to be too gruesome here, but like I would imagine your outfit that you were wearing, your officer outfit, had Tupac's blood all over it, right?
You know what? It's kind of funny that you mentioned that, because at the time, and you know, cops get blood on their uniforms all the time,
right?
And there probably was, and I've had people, "Oh my God, what did you do with that uniform?
Right.
I want to buy it from you." And I was like, I have no idea what happened to that uniform. It was a bike uniform, yellow shirt and a pair of shorts.
Did you keep anything from that night?
No, I don't have. Well, I've got the gun. I've still got the gun that I had with me, but
nothing else from that night.
Nothing
the
else
bike
from that
or
night.
anything. No.
And I even looked for the uniform, but I couldn't find a because uniforms change over the years. But
you understand though, because there's a lot of fans out there that in Tupac, let's call it for what it is. Obviously, he made some mistakes in his life, but he is one of the most, I would say, in the rap industry. I don't speak for the rap industry, but probably one of the most influential rappers of all time. There's others, Run DMC, Biggie, Dr. Dre. I mean, there's a lot of other legends, but he's right there. He's right there.
There's no doubt about it, and I'm not a guy that knows a lot about rap.
Neither do I, but
okay.
I do know that.
I know this. I've talked to people that are heavily into rap, and they say he is the biggest guy ever. No one's bigger than Tupac. He's the king. Obviously, there's a couple that are
no
way
question.
Up there, but.
So the days, weeks, and months after that, I mean, this is in the years. We're going back to September of 1996. I'm not going to use the term haunt because you didn't do anything wrong. You actually you did your job, and it sounds to me like on the scene of this crime, you did it very well. You wanted to make sure that, you were safe. You wanted to make sure that you had no idea what was going on. You told people to get on the ground. You followed protocol. And let's be honest, you tried to find out, even in Tupac's last moments when he was conscious, you tried to find out, as any good police officer would, who did this. We need to find out who did this. You weren't able to be successful in doing that because people didn't cooperate, including Tupac, even in the last moments. I wonder this. Let me ask you this question. If Tupac knew in that moment, maybe he did, maybe he didn't, I don't know. But if he knew he was going to be dead 2 days later, do you think he would have told you in those last moments who did it?
Boy, that's really hard to say. I think he was a pretty hardcore guy, as far as like, I don't talk to the police. Now, if you know you're going to die, you got to think that's a game changer. But he was and me and you have discussed a little bit, but I give him credit for that. A lot of people have said to me, not a lot of people, but some people have said to me and on the internet, well, you're just trying to make him look bad. We want him to look bad. I go, and my thought is, make him look bad. If I want to make him look bad,
This is old school.
I could have said he cried. He said, I'm hurt. But
No, that's who he was.
He was
old school.
He was hardcore to the end.
Hardcore gangster, old school. This wasn't a phony. This was who Tupac was, and this is the way he lived his life. He had a very difficult upbringing, and he certainly made something of himself. Now, whatever criminal activity he did or didn't do in his life, I'm not going to comment on that. What we do know, and even as his last moments that he was conscious, he stood true to who he was. He wasn't a narc. That's not who he was. And by the way, back in the days of Spilatra and Lefty Rosenthal, in those days of Gangster Vegas, the mob, they were the same way. They didn't narc. They took care of it themselves. And I'm not condoning it, but I'm also not going to put that down because they stood true to their word. The people that you look down upon are people that claimed that they weren't narcs, and then they went into, hiding and did do that. So anyway, we don't need to get into all the Sopranos episodes for people to know what I'm talking about.
But I think that what you're talking about, that theory, I think it was even stronger in the 90s than it is now. I think now people's bonds with each other are not as tight, not as true, not as loyal. I think back then it's like you were loyal to your cause and loyal to your friends to a higher degree than you are now. And I think now these guys rat on each other at the drop of a hat if there's something in it for them.
Now let's talk about, Chris, where we were then now to where we are right now and why we're talking about this. To my shock and to your shock, when you heard it, you didn't believe it either, that Metro Police I shouldn't say invade, that's the wrong word, searched the home of a guy by the name of Keffi D in Henderson, Nevada.
Keefy D.
Or I'm sorry, Keefy D, I apologize. Henderson, Nevada, maybe 15, 20-minute drive from where the actual murder took place. And my understanding, and you could tell me if I'm wrong, is that this guy has done some interviews, bragging, almost gloating, that he gave the gun to Anderson, who he claims, and I don't know if this is true or not, was his nephew. Anderson died a couple years later. Was it self-inflicted gunshot wound?
No, he was killed selling dope in a car wash in Compton.
Really?
Yes.
I did not know that. Okay, so that's what happened. Why do you think it is that Metro Police never found this guy in the year or two after the murder? Why?
Well, I wouldn't say it's not like we were actively looking for him and couldn't find him. We didn't have as much information then as we do now.
Okay.
And, with the whole nobody cooperating thing.
It was difficult.
It was difficult.
No video of anything on that street where the shots took place. You have literally no witnesses that are cooperating, right?
Exactly.
So it's almost impossible.
And the drive-by shootings, just by their nature, offer very little physical evidence.
Right.
So we've got almost nothing. The best piece of evidence we come away with from that whole thing is the actual projectile bullets that are in Tupac's body.
Yeah.
Because at least we have those, which could be used at a later time to match up to a firearm.
They never found the murder weapon.
No, never found the murder weapon.
And this guy dies a couple years later in Compton.
Not even a couple. I'd say like a year, a little over a year later, he dies in Compton.
So let's talk about this investigation in Henderson with this guy. What do you know about this? What do you think about this? And do you actually believe that this was the guy in the back seat with Anderson that gave him the gun and he was in that vehicle? What do you think about this?
Okay, a lot of stuff there, but I'd start with this. I had seen interviews with this guy, Keefy D, on TV, YouTube, whatever, bragging that he actively took part in this homicide. I mean, when you're sitting, and he claims he was sitting next to Orlando Anderson, handed Orlando Anderson the gun so that he could shoot Tupac. Yep. So, I mean, you're not just a witness at that point. You're actively participating in a homicide. And when I saw him saying it on TV, I was like, I couldn't believe it. I was like, this guy is actively coming out on his own, by his own choice, saying that he took part in Tupac's murder. So two things. First of all, he's confessing to a murder, or at least being part of a murder. And the other thing is, do you really want to go out into the world telling people you're the guy that's responsible for killing Tupac? I mean, a lot of people love this guy, and it only takes one of them to be pissed off enough to do something about it.
Right.
So I mean, I wouldn't want to have that brand on me. I mean, I've had people
I agree.
hot at me, which I still don't completely understand, but I understand it a little bit. But and here I'm trying to help the guy. So if you're going to tell the world you took part in killing him, I would say that's you're playing with fire with that. And then to come out and say you're part of the homicide. How long are the police department, the DA's office, the detectives involved in the case, society in general? How long are we supposed to sit there and listen to this guy brag about taking part in a murder?
Can I comment on that? Here's what I think, Chris. Here's my opinion on this. I think Metro Police were very ticked off that here you have an unsolved murder case. Metro Police or anybody, they never want an unsolved case. They want to solve it. And I'm not saying it's their fault, by the way, but here you have this guy out there doing interviews. It makes Metro look bad. And I think some people at Metro just said, that's it. We've had enough of this effing guy. We're going to go after him now, and we're going to try to get some information or any type of evidence we can to get this guy. Here's my understanding of what happened, though, in 2009. I've heard that Metro did an interview with this guy. I don't know if you heard this. In 2009, and in that interview, they had a written agreement that they couldn't use anything in that interview against him criminally. Now, I don't know what was said in that interview, but that's my understanding of what happened there. That doesn't mean this guy has immunity.
Right.
And I think some people on the higher-ups at Metro said, that's it. We've had enough of this guy. We're going to go in there and, at the very minimum, get him to shut his mouth, and maybe we find something. That's what I think is going on here.
I think there's a lot of that involved, and I think that what he did is he put the police in a situation where they have to do something. The world is watching. The world's saying, hey, this guy's confessing. No one's doing anything about it. Why isn't somebody doing something? And it's come to a point where it's like, you know what? We've got to do something because he's running his mouth saying he did it. I mean, how long is everybody supposed to just sit back and watch this guy before something happens? So, and like we said, there is evidence still out there. The biggest thing is the gun. The gun was never found. Do I think it would be in a guy's house, Keefe D's house 27 years later? Probably not.
Can't they find out, though, if Keefe D is actually the uncle of this guy Anderson? Isn't that easy to find out?
That may have been found out. They're not talking it yet. Nobody from Metro is really saying anything. But it's my understanding that the detective who is the main lead in this investigation at this point. He's done his homework, so I think he would probably
with all the trouble that Suge Knight has been in as a murderer himself. You would think that somebody would have approached him and said, "Hey, listen, we need all the information on who did this, and maybe we could knock a few years off your sentence." I mean, does that surprise you? That my understanding that hasn't happened.
I don't think that's happened. I don't think it's going to happen because Suge Knight he lacks credibility would be the understatement of the century. This guy has come out publicly and named probably 10 different people that have killed, that are responsible for Tupac's death. I mean, he can't tell the truth about what day of the week it is. At one point, he was getting a divorce, and he came out and made a public statement that his ex-wife that he's in the divorce with, she's the one responsible for the murder. And I'm like, well, yeah, if you're going to blame somebody, you might as well go for the ex-wife.
That makes sense.
He has no value. I wonder at this point if he even knows what truth is and what truth isn't. And not to mention he's in prison for murder himself now.
Right.
And I haven't
he ain't
really
getting out, and his health isn't very good either.
he's not in good health, and I don't think he's going anywhere.
So let me ask you this: with all the connections that you have, I know you're a retired police lieutenant, but you're an honest guy, and I respect your opinion. Do you believe that Metro Police eventually will be arresting this guy, or do you think it's all for naught and it's just a scare tactic to say, "Hey, knock it off, stop making us look bad," or do you think Metro's actually going to make an arrest?
I got to tell you, I'd be very surprised if there's an arrest because I just, and you know what else? I hope I'm wrong. I hope they've come up with enough to have an arrest. But you got to remember, it's 27 years later. There was never very much physical evidence. Most everybody involved in this case is dead. The chances of getting on prosecution at this point would almost take a miracle. I think the department still has to do their due diligence and check into things. So I would say it's not just a fact that he's pissed people off, Keefe D. although I'm sure he has pissed people off. But they've got to show us, they being the department, have got to show a certain amount of due diligence that they really did all that they could with
But
this
it's
thing.
not, so Chris, it's not really a crime. Like if I went on the air, which I wouldn't, but hypothetically speaking, if I went on the air and I said, yeah, I was a part of that murder, I gave blah, blah, blah the gun, even if I'm knowingly lying, is that a crime? That's not a crime.
It's not a
right?
crime to say it, of course, but it certainly opens you up to be investigated.
Right.
And I think it's important here that people know and understand there's a big difference between a search warrant and an arrest warrant. And what we have now is a search warrant. So all that search warrant does is you've got a judge that says, yes, there's enough information here for you guys to look through his house. It's not enough to arrest him. That will take more. But maybe they find some evidence there that will lead them to an arrest. So, I mean, step one in going after this guy would of course be a search warrant.
So you agree with me then that I believe that this guy just pissed off Metro, and they're trying to, at least in my personal opinion, send a warning, which would be like, hey, you better knock it off.
I think that's part of it. Yeah.
And obviously this has made national news.
Oh, God, it's worldwide news.
It's unfortunate that there haven't been any arrests. I don't blame Metro. I know there's a lot of people out there, oh, the police haven't done their due diligence. No, I don't see that at all. When you have so many people, like you said, that have not cooperated. You said there were 8, 9 people. Let me ask you this. Going back to that night, is there anything you would have done differently? Knowing what you know now, is there anything you could have? And if so, is there anything that you question, you say, man, I wish I did that differently, if anything?
Well, first of all, I would have had a camera with me. How about that?
Right.
But, a lot of people, especially the young people, don't understand that we didn't have cameras on cell phones yet. So it was very difficult to get, and, body cams for cops were still 20 years away. So that was not going to happen. I've thought about that. There's really not a lot more that could have been done that night. I think we did what we could that night, and all the appropriate people were called out, and the ball was rolling, and we collected evidence, and we interviewed witnesses the best we could, and I don't really know how much farther you could have taken it.
Yeah, I don't think you could have done much of anything differently as well. It sounded like you acted like a very responsible police officer, and you did all the right things at that time, which was a very hectic and difficult situation to be in. There's no question about that. Have you had Tupac fans or just deranged people ever threaten you or anything crazy happen to you?
Yeah. Almost all of that over the internet. So you know how that goes. Anybody can hop on there and say things. So I actually wish I would have saved all of the negative comments and made like a little coffee table book out of them, because some of them were pretty funny. Usually it's pretty rare that I'm confronted by an angry person in public.
It makes no sense, though.
I don't get it. When
You're not Derek Chauvin. You're the opposite. It makes absolutely no sense. Like, I don't understand. You didn't do anything wrong. In fact, you were trying to help the guy. Like,
I was told by a close friend of mine when this whole thing started. He's like, you have to he knows a lot about the rap world, and he's like, you have to understand. And he knew I was going to come out and tell my story. He said, you have to understand that there's going to be some people that aren't going to like this, and it's going to piss them off. And I was kind of like a little taken back. I'm like, well, why would they be pissed at me? I'm just trying to help the guy and help his case. And he's like, doesn't matter. They're just not going to like it. They love Tupac, and the fact that the last guy he talked to was a cop is just not going to sit well with them. And that has been the case for some people.
It's interesting because, and I don't think you'll mind me saying this, I remember interviewing you 7, 8 years ago.
Right.
And it was, I think, your first real
It
interview.
was very early on.
This was,
yes.
I think I got the first interview with you in telling your story on the air about this. And I remember when you came in, you were looking over your shoulder. I remember, and I know things have changed a little bit now for you, but I remember you had told me that you were circling the parking lot at the radio station I was working out at the time, and you looked a little scared. And I said to myself, this poor guy, right? Here he is. He has a nice long career at Metro, a distinguished career. He did everything right in the most stressful moments that a police officer could be in. What's the worst thing you can do if you're a police officer? Going into an environment where you know shots were fired, and you're the one cop on the scene and you have absolutely no idea if anyone's armed, your life is in major jeopardy. Oh, yeah, it also happens to be right in the middle of the Las Vegas Strip, and you did everything right. You pull your gun out, you tell people to get down, you're helping the injured, at least you're trying to, and yet you still are scared at some point that there are crazy people out there that might want to harm you. And I remember meeting you for the first time, and I said that. I felt bad for you. I said, this poor guy, he shouldn't have to live like that. He didn't do anything wrong.
First of all, I appreciate everything you said. And it was all very new to me then. I wasn't used to receiving, not just threats like we're going to kill you, but like detailed threats,
Right.
And going into that whole thing. So it was all kind of new to me. I was a little, I never expected the amount of press and this whole thing to blow up like it did. I thought when this came out, it would be news for a week, and it would be pretty much kept to the rap community, and then it would just go away. Well, okay, mistake on my part, but
You were definitely wrong about that.
I was, here we are, 20. It's been a few years later and a couple of hundred interviews later, but if I could tell you about one of the things that happened to me with a fan, I was in a. And let me tell you, 99% of Tupac fans treat me great, and they've gotten better over the years. The situation has improved. I think they understand more, and 99% of them treat me very, very well. And I was in one of the resort casinos here in town, big nice place, and I was sitting at the bar.
So you must be talking about Circus.
The buffet is, as a matter of fact. But I was sitting at the bar, and I was with a girl, a good friend of mine.
Yep.
And I noticed there were like four guys, not like four, it was four guys at the bar. They're kind of eyeing me a little bit, and I'm just doing my own thing. I'm just like, don't even look at them, this, that, and the other. Well, I stood up. Because it was high top bar chairs. So I like to stand up sometimes at the bar. I just sit down too long. So I stand up. Now, when I stand up, my chair's behind me. I mean, it's still like literally touching the back of my butt. So all of a sudden, one of the guys from the group, kind of with attitude, walks over to me, grabs my chair, carries it away, and takes it back to their group. Now, they don't even need another chair, mind you. So he just takes the chair and starts walking away. So I look over there, and when I look over him, the guy on the far end of the bar is pointing at me, and he's literally pointing at me. He's going, "That's the guy. I'm telling you, that's him. That's the guy." So, when you get up and you take somebody's chair, you're just basically saying, "Let's fight." I mean, that's all that is.
Yeah.
And
well, that's just stupid.
And
Stupidity.
there's four of them. I'm with somebody.
You walk away.
You've really got no choice.
Those people are
They're just
complete
setting me up
morons.
for a 4-on-1 beatdown. Is all that
Complete
was.
morons. I don't know if Chris, if you mind sticking around for one more segment.
No,
is that
I'm
okay?
I'm having a blast.
I appreciate that
Let's do it.
because what you just talked about, because maybe we can get a little bit away from the Tupac stuff because we've talked a lot about it, but I just want to talk about policing to you in general and the attitude towards law enforcement today. I want to talk to you a little bit about that, if that's okay. So before we do that, I want to tell you guys about my good friends at Sahara West Urgent and Primary Care. They're located right down the street, Sahara and Jones, and they're located at 6125 West Sahara. I was in and out of there in 20 minutes. You don't have to have an appointment, but you can give them a call if you'd like, 702-248-0554. You could also visit them online at SaharaWestUrgentCare.com. $95 copay. They take most insurances. If you don't have it, $95. They pretty much do everything in this place. Please go to Sahara West Urgent and Primary Care and tell them that I sent you. All right, we're going to take a break, and when we come back with Chris Carroll, retired Metro Police Lieutenant, I want to talk to him about policing in general today, the attacks on law enforcement, but on the other side of things, I will also talk about, is there systemic racism in law enforcement today, and what does he make of the George Floyd situation and all that? We'll get to all that coming up next. We'll take a quick break. We'll be back right after this. You're listening to Pushing the Limits right here on KSHP.
Hey everybody, are you struggling to find a pizza place that reminds you of Brooklyn? That true blue New York style pie? Well, worry no more. Stallone's Italian Eatery Pizza is a knockout. We're located at 467 East Silverado Ranch Boulevard, just off of Premier Road, half a mile east of South Point Casino, just minutes from the Las Vegas Strip. Come by and grab a slice of pie. Plus, check out our Brooklyn-inspired Italian cuisine. Our sandwiches are super hero, that is, because why be a sub when you can be a hero? Stallone's Italian Eatery is here to serve you phenomenal food, Vegas. Forget about it.
Buying or selling a home is a huge life event that requires guidance from an expert in the industry and community. My name is Blake Wynn. You may recognize my name as my grandfather was the best governor the state of Nevada has ever had. Growing up in Las Vegas, I've come to know this community intricately. Now, I am raising a family here as well, so I understand all the issues impacting our home and quality of life. As the top realtor for the #1 real estate team at Keller Williams, you can have confidence in my experience, knowledge, and track record. When it comes to buying, selling, or investing in real estate, choose a name you can trust and someone who understands the community you call home. Call Blake Wynn today and experience the difference of a trusted expert. 702-540-3311.
Sapphire Pool and Day Club, the world's only topless gentlemen's day club, introduces its 2023 pool season lineup with a bevy of beauties and social media celebrities throughout the summer who will all host alongside hundreds of Sapphire's topless poolside entertainers. Enjoy brunch in the sun with items like frittata-style omelets, stripping chicken, and French kiss toast before washing it down with signature summertime cocktails. 10 lines beware. Go Bear! Ladies are welcome to go topless within the day club for the ultimate party. Guests can purchase affordable day bed packages, cabana packages, lounge chairs, and more. The best part though? Pushing the Limits will be broadcasting shows every other Friday throughout the pool season with a ton of surprise celebrity guests. Wow! Reserve your spot now. For more info, visit sapphirepoolLV.com or call 702-869-0003. That's 702-869-0003. See you at Sapphire.
Hey everybody, it's Brian Shapiro from Pushing the Limits. I want to tell you guys about Sahara West Urgent Care and Wellness. They're conveniently located on the southwest corner of Sahara and Jones. They're open Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. and Saturday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. At Sahara West Urgent Care, they'll take care of all your healthcare needs. They offer routine services such as physicals, STD testing, car accident treatment, and work injuries. You name it, they do it. They have on-site x-ray, EKG, ultrasound, and labs. They treat chronic conditions such as asthma, blood pressure, diabetes, and more. They also offer general wellness exams, treatments such as testosterone enhancement, and cancer screening. They're located on Sahara, 6125 West Sahara Avenue. Their number is 702-248-0554. And the best part, they accept most major insurances and affordable cash pay prices, office visits starting at just $95. And I'm also a client, so please give them a call, 702-248-0554. All right, welcome back. It's Pushing the Limits on a Wednesday. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to tell you guys about my good friend Blake Wynn with Keller Williams. If you're thinking of buying or selling a home, by the way, his friend Zach was phenomenal yesterday. He was a great guest, and I can't wait to have him back on. He was great. The reason why my parents are moving here in a week after the passing of my sister, I said, why don't you guys move out to Vegas? And they gave Blake a call, and they gave my family so much great information. I can't say enough nice things about Blake Gwynn and how he's helped my family at Keller Williams. Even if you're thinking of buying or selling a home, will you please give Blake a call? Here's the number, 702-540-3311. It's his personal number. Again, that number one more time, 702-540-3311. Born and raised here in Las Vegas, and of course his grandfather, the great Kenny Gwynn, the former governor. And I was just with Blake over at Jackson's Bar and Grill a few weeks ago. He loved it. He got the prime rib over there, which was awesome. And great, my favorite gaming bar in town, which is at Flamingo and Jones. And I was just telling our special guest, former retired Metro Police Lieutenant Chris Carroll, that Brian takes, the owner over there, Brian Slipbach, takes care of current and former law enforcement. You could have a meal on him there. So you can't beat
Excellent.
that.
I'm going to get that info
Yes,
before I leave.
yes, I will. You got to check him out over there at Jackson's Bar and Grill. And, of course, Chris Carroll joining us, the first person on the scene of the Tupac Shakur shooting. It's mesmerizing. It's crazy, and we'll see where the investigation goes from here. I tend to agree with Chris that there's probably not going to be an arrest here, and this was probably for the most part, hey, knock it off to this guy. Stop gloating and saying that you were a part of the murder of Tupac. But we'll have to wait and see what happens, Chris. I want to talk to you about law enforcement in general, and I feel like the relationships between law enforcement and just everyday citizens are not up to par where they should be. And I'm not just blaming law enforcement. I'm blaming citizens for that as well. I think it's a two-way street. Do you agree with me that it just seems to me there's too much hatred out there, and it makes your a job of a police officer more difficult?
It makes everything more difficult. If I could just tell you a quick
Sure.
Observation of mine. I had been a cop for a long time, 25 years, and having done it that long, you start to think, at least I did, and I think probably most of my peers as well, that the stuff you see every day and the stuff that you go through every day, it starts to become your world so much that you just think everything is like that. You think everybody is seeing what you're seeing. You think everybody is doing the stuff you're doing. And what had happened is then when I retired, about 6 months after I retired, I was like, oh my God, it's so much different being a civilian. It's like I think of how many fights have I been in since I retired? None. How many dead bodies have I seen since I retired? None. How many issues have I had to deal with that were highly confrontational and
Right.
violent?
Sure.
Maybe one, maybe two, I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's such a different world, and I'm like, well, no wonder people don't get the police. It's all candy canes and unicorns out here.
Right.
Everybody thinks that the little nice little world that they live in. Let's face it, most of us live in a pretty nice setting. And obviously not everybody does. But I think a lot of these people that live in nice settings, they don't understand what the cops are going through every day to do that job.
I totally agree with you, and I've always said this, that I think you could be pro-police and pro-Black Lives Matter movement. I'm both. I don't condone violence at any Black Lives Matter protest, and I certainly don't condone police brutality either. But I think the overwhelming majority of police officers like yourself are good people who risk their lives every day to serve and protect. There are bad cops out there. One thing I do want to see more of, and I'm not accusing you of this, but one thing I think we could see more of are more good cops calling out bad cops. I think we need to see more of that. Just like I think we need to see more citizens praising good policing, right? I try to talk about that all the time. A good cop, going into an active shooting situation, saving lives, hero. That needs to be praised. I remember there was a story, and I don't remember where it was, but there was two African Americans, two black teenagers. And if you remember, there was one black teenager that had a knife in her hand and was about to lunge at another teenager. White officer
Right.
comes out of the car, shoots the teen with the knife. Says, put the knife down. She doesn't do it. Shoots her. Completely justified. Investigated. The video proves that the officer was justified. By the way, the officer's a hero. Okay? The officer's a hero. What does LeBron James do? Now listen, maybe it's a bad time to criticize LeBron James because his son just had a cardiac arrest, and as I said yesterday, thoughts and prayers with his family, and we're glad his son is doing better. But I'm just using this as an example. People rush to judgment. Yes, let's call out bad policing, but that was a situation where that cop is a hero. Ferguson, another example. Michael Brown. I'm sorry if people don't want to hear this, but Michael Brown attacked a police officer, and he got what he deserved. If you're dumb enough to reach for an officer's gun, which, by the way, forensics proved, the evidence was overwhelming that Michael Brown attacked that officer's life was destroyed. And I will blame Barack Obama for this situation. He brought members of his administration down to Michael Brown's funeral. That's disgusting. That's disgusting. What about this officer? So I think that people shouldn't rush to judgment, and when they see race, they assume white cop, black person. Is there systemic racism? Yes. Are there racist cops out there? Yes. But that doesn't mean we can rush to judgment and make gross assumptions. It happened in Ferguson. The hands up, don't shoot was a lie. We learned that. And it happened with LeBron James. Never an apology from LeBron James. This officer is a hero. In fact, the person who could have been a victim, the family praised the officer. Black, by the way. So that's my opinion on the whole thing. I don't know if you agree or disagree.
No,
with
that
anything I
all
said.
sounds completely
Yeah.
reasonable to me. You know, it's funny. Police departments, as you go around the country, they all kind of have their own personalities, their own idiosyncrasies, their own uniqueness. And I think a lot of people don't realize that departments are very different. I think the departments where you usually see trouble in the form of corruption, things like that. I'm not going to name any cities because I'm not, I don't want to talk bad about anybody, but your large cities tend to be,
Minneapolis,
northern city, large northern cities, East Coast,
Seattle,
and I'll tell you what, I was so fortunate to be part of Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, because I tell you, none of that stuff absolutely does not fly here. There is zero tolerance. And
Kevin McMahill's a great sheriff.
He looks like he's doing a great job, as best I can tell. And I know Kevin. I don't know him really close personally, but I've worked with him over the years.
He's a good man.
But that type of thing here, I remember, just for an example, I remember in the early 90s, there was a cop here on Metro that was rolling drunks. By rolling drunks, I mean pull up on a guy, he's drunk, he's arrested, you take the $20 out of his pocket. That was, and he was subsequently set up for a sting and arrested. That was 30 years ago, and every cop in the department still remembers that incident. So, the things that we've had here as far as that type of behavior has been so minimal.
You agree with me, though, that
absolutely not
there's
tolerated.
a lot of heroic every day. Officers do heroic things every day. But when you hear a story of whether it be Rodney King, you were an officer back then, right?
Yes.
Rodney King, or George Floyd. It hurts every officer, right? When one officer or two officers or four officers out of God knows how many do something terrible, it's bad for everybody, right?
Absolutely. And I teach at Police Academy, and I go through that with these young guys coming up. I was like, when you do something like that, you burn all of us. And even if you do, you've mentioned like very high profile situations. Let's take it down to a little less. I said, when there's an officer who gets arrested, say for domestic violence, he's harmed his spouse. You can guarantee that the next 2 weeks, every time you stop a car, you do something simple like write a ticket, you're going to hear about, oh, but you cops, you can all beat your wives. That's okay. That's cool with you guys. But you're gonna write me a ticket for speeding. I'll tell you what. Maybe instead of writing a ticket, how about if you stop beating your wife? That's the kind of crap that they're gonna. That when someone screws up, when someone does something intentionally wrong that they know is wrong, they're putting every cop in a situation, even if it's on the other side of the country. And you try to explain to somebody, hey, that was in another state. Sure. I don't know that guy. I don't work with him. I don't condone it. It's got nothing to do with us here right now.
Yeah, and that's absurd. I want to ask you a question, because tell me if you think I'm wrong here. I'm in Cedar City, Utah. I'm seeing a friend of mine who used to coach a basketball team out there, so I'm with a friend. That night, we go to a local bar in Cedar City. I think there's only one. We go to the bar. I don't even have one drink.
There's a bar in Cedar City?
Yeah, believe it or not, there is. I don't even have one drink. My friend has a couple drinks. I don't drink. We leave the bar. There's no stop signs or anything. I would have known that. I'm not driving recklessly, and I'm pulled over 2 blocks away. Cop says I went through a stop sign. I said, which stop sign? What are you talking about? Doesn't answer me. He asks for my license and registration. I give it to him. I comply. I'm very cooperative. 3 other police officers stop by. They see a syringe in my car. Okay, I'm a diabetic. All they had to do was ask me. They say, can we search your vehicle? I said, why? And then I look over and I see they're shining a flash. I say, can I go into my pocket? Can I show you my insulin? I show them the insulin. Okay, they kind of back off a little bit. And then the officer says, okay, you're free to go. I said, well, why did you pull me over in the first place? You know that wasn't a stop sign there. He says, you're free to go. Then another cop comes over. So I'm free to go. I'm not being detained. Do you mind if we search your vehicle, sir? I said, why? Haven't we just been through this? Because I'm starting to get agitated now.
Now you've been pulled over twice in the same...
Same pull-over, right.
Okay.
So now I'm agitated because here I am. I'm complying. I didn't go through a stop sign. And I said, officer, why do you want to search? I think we smell marijuana. So at this point, I know he's full of crap, okay? And he's just being a jerk. So I say, officer, this is what I said to him. And he's a young guy in his early 20s. I said, I'm going to imagine you're a rookie or maybe first, second year. I said, I'm talking to you man to man now. Let's pretend like you're not a cop for a second. here's what I do for a living.
Well, that pissed him off when you called him a rookie. I'll tell you
Well,
that.
I said his first year. I think. Well, he didn't get angry.
Even though you may have been right.
And then
Yeah.
I'm kind of, I'm saying, here's what I do for a living. I'm pro-police. And I said, this is what I do, and I've helped raise money for law enforcement. Here's what I do. But I'm saying what you're doing to me right now is why some people hate police officers. You are harassing me. I have complied with everything you guys have told me to do. I've been cooperative. I haven't been disrespectful to you, have I? You're lying to me right now, and you have nothing better to do than to search my car when you've already checked my license. You know I don't have any warrants. I'm not a criminal. We've already established the fact that I didn't do anything wrong, and the last cop lied. I didn't go through a stop sign. You guys are just checking to see if I was drunk, which I'm not. I said, this is why people don't like police, what you're doing right now. And he kind of looked at me, and he didn't know what to say, except, okay, I understand. And I said, good. If you understand, then don't do it to the next person. And then I drove off. But I was pissed. I was pissed. Because, and again, I don't want to make it a racial thing, but I will in this instance. And you tell me if you disagree. I don't know what's in those officers' hearts, but I know I'm white. If I'm a different color, does that go down the same way? I don't know, and maybe I shouldn't think like that. Maybe I shouldn't, but I've seen black people pulled over. I've been in the car with black people that were pulled over for doing nothing wrong, and I know most officers would not do that. I know that. But that instance gave me just a small taste of maybe some officers that are not doing their job correctly.
Okay, you bring up multiple points, so let's address the race thing first.
Sure.
Let's remember this: you were white, you got pulled over, you got harassed, according to you, and you were white. So this happens to all of us. I've been on the bad side of a traffic stop as well. Horrible guy, and I just couldn't even believe it. And these things happen. I think a lot of times it's assumed that race is a factor when it's not. What is a factor is the guy is a jerk.
Right.
It's what
In
happens
a nice way, I told him that.
Is like, no, he didn't do it because you're black. He does that to everybody.
Yeah.
It's like, well, have you ever worked at a place where a guy was an a-hole? Well, so have I. There's a couple out there.
I don't disagree with you, Chris. But do you believe there are some instances where a law enforcement, a police officer, could treat somebody differently because of the color of their skin?
I mean, I'm sure it can happen. It's like, did I see that? I honestly, truthfully don't. And here's a lot of things as far as the pullover. And check this out for yourself at night. When you're driving in back of somebody at night, you cannot tell what race they are 9 out of 10 times. You have no idea. When you're pulling them over, all you see is a silhouette in a car, if you're lucky.
But that's what I thought about when I left that scene, and me and my friend were talking in the car. I said, would that have gone down the same way if I looked like somebody else? I don't know the answer to that question, and in no way, shape, or form am I saying that the majority of cops are racist. I've never made that statement before. I do believe there's system. Do you believe? I guess this is the better question.
Oh, geez, you're really going to get me on this?
No,
this is going to be a lose-lose. But go ahead.
I'm not talking about law enforcement necessarily.
All right.
I'm just saying in general terms in life. Do you believe systemic racism exists?
I think it exists. I don't think it exists to the extent that a lot of people like to say it is.
That's fair. I think that's a fair way of putting it. Let me ask you this question now. What do you think is the biggest misconception with law enforcement? And if there's one thing you would ask citizens do when it comes to law enforcement, or do better, or do more of, what would that be?
I would say, let's address the citizens first. Just go along with things. And in the end, everything should be explained. It's like I see these. TikTok is very big on it. People just full-blown baiting the police. They've created an artificial situation and put the cop in a bad spot before he even gets there.
There's a lot of people who video stuff like that on YouTube. By the way, they're losers.
And then when the cop gets there, they do every possible thing in the book.
There's a guy with a camera. Sorry to interrupt. There's a guy, people with cameras that are on public, and they're just like taking pictures of people and videoing people. And it's like, dude, just don't you have something better to do? I understand some some cops don't understand that it might be, and they should, that it's legal to video on a public place, blah, blah. But they're just trying to get a lawsuit. It's like, get a life, dude.
Right. It's just baiting. They're just trying to pick away, trying to find something wrong. And, I see these horrible things like the cops, I think it was in New York, they just respond to a neighborhood, some kind of neighborhood beef, no big deal. And all the guys, a lot of teenagers there, they just start dumping buckets of water and drinks over the cop's head.
What?
It's just I swear to God, look it up on YouTube. You'll.
I think I might have heard of this.
And there was more than one of these, and just dumping drinks over their head because they knew in that particular jurisdiction that those cops are pretty much handcuffed as far as their ability to deal with people. And like I said, these situations change around the country. I'll tell you what, in Vegas, if you dumped a drink over a cop's head, you're going to jail.
Yeah.
And immediately. I mean, it's
isn't
not
that
even
considered assault?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it's it would be battery. And when something like that happens, I don't know what you're dumping over my head. It could be anything. You'd
So
be
I agree
dumping
with
a
you.
cup of acid over my head for all I know.
And on the flip side of what I just talked about, there are, and again, I'm not speaking of all people who are minorities, but the last thing a black person wants to hear from somebody like me is comply, right? But what I try to say to people is, listen, just because you comply doesn't mean you're going to be unscathed 100% of the time, but boy, you're giving yourself a much better chance. Worst case scenario, let's just say you think you're dealing with a cop that is having a bad day, or you think you're dealing with a cop that might be racist. You think non-compliance is going to make things better for you? Do what the cop tells you to do, and in most of these the overwhelming amount of officer-involved shootings, not all, but most, it starts with non-compliance. And a lot of people don't want to hear that. Do what the officer tells you to do, and in most cases, you're going to be okay.
Yeah, so many of these cases that have now become famous, it just was completely avoidable. If they just would have played along, and if the cop did something fine or the cop did something wrong, you can deal with that later. Just from the initial onset,
People
if they just
don't wanna
comply,
hear that. They don't
just
wanna
go
hear it.
along. And it's like just even the simplest things now, and it's gotten so much worse than when I was working. But you see all the videos just pulling over somebody and asking for a driver's license. Why? First of all, they roll down their window, either not at all or roll it down a quarter.
You know what they'll say,
quarter
right?
inch.
Well, it's my right. I don't have to roll it down all the way. Dude, if you just comply with the officer, you might even have a better chance of not getting a ticket.
And you see this thing, it gets worse and worse and worse, and now it's to the point where the cop has got to break a window to get somebody out. And I just watching the whole thing, and I just watch it, and I'm like, this is a mess.
And
it
what's
just
going to happen
doesn't
there?
need to be.
Even though I agree with everything you said. Even though, it's important to know your rights, and you don't have to roll your window down all the way. I think most cops would tell you, if you just comply and you do what the officer asks you to do, give him your driver's license. Don't am I being detained? Blah 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 blah. If you don't play that game and you just cooperate for the most part, then you're making your situation probably better. I've had situations before where I've been pulled over and the cop would give me a warning. You know why? Because I rolled down, hi officer, I apologize if I was going a little more over the speed limit. My apologies. I support you guys. If you're respectful, you have a better chance. That's all I'm saying.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and there
yeah.
certainly is a phrase, we used to use it all the time, talking yourself into a ticket or talking yourself into jail.
Right.
And it's like, hey, I pulled this guy over, say he's got a headlight out. I had no intention of even writing a ticket. Just pull the guy over,
be a
tell him
jerk.
his headlight
Yeah.
out. And the guy
Right.
talks himself into a ticket. He talks himself into jail. It's like you took nothing and have created this big mess now that has to be dealt with.
And you
Here's
know
the good
what?
news.
Yeah.
There is a little bit of good news. Now I haven't actively pulled anybody over in 10 years.
Right.
The vast majority of people will comply with what you ask them to do. And I talk about that at the academy. I go, look, because you get into all these defensive tactics and what if this and what if that. Most people will do what you ask them to do. And once they do that, when the situation's under control, you owe them an explanation.
Sure.
They should know why
Sure.
you did what you did. And that's
agree.
all. And that will cut out a lot of
And
your
here's-
discourtesy
I
complaints
agree.
as well.
Here's something that I try to do. When I see officers in restaurants or on the streets, whatever the case may be, what I try to do is I try to shake their hand and say, hey, I just want to thank you for what you do. And I'll tell you, most officers, they give me this big smile, and I can see how much they appreciate that. As much as I will call out bad policing, and there is some bad policing out there, I call that out as well. Not, again, to dive deep into that, but, there was a shooting downtown during a Black Lives Matter protest that I believe was not justified, and I believe it was covered up. That's another story we don't need to get into. But I call out those things, but I also say it is your duty as a citizen. You should be respectful. You should comply as long as your civil rights aren't being violated, which we don't want that to happen either. And I'm just saying, I just going up to random police officers, hey, I don't know anything about them, but I just say, hey, I just want to thank you for what you do. That's important.
That's good, and I think it means a lot to 95% of those guys. I
Yeah.
think will probably truly appreciate that, because especially with the way things are now. Now, I think, and tell me if you disagree, but over the last couple of years, say 3-4 years, things have actually gotten better. I think things have improved.
I agree with you. I think the relationship between cops and people in general, it's starting to improve a little bit. Even during some of the Black Lives Matter protests, yes, there was violence, and anyone who harmed law enforcement during that time, they're scumbags and they deserve to be in jail. But I just remember images of officers taking a knee with people, and I just thought that was a great sign of unity. And there are a lot of good cops out there, like yourself. You've had a good, distinguished career, and we need to be respectful. And listen, it goes both ways. Cops need to do maybe a better job of showing that with citizens, and citizens absolutely need to do a better job. If there's bad cops out there, I want them held accountable, but I also want bad citizens held accountable. So it has to go both ways, and being a police officer is an extremely difficult job, and I could never do it. And that's why I appreciate what you've done in your career, not just the night of September 7th of '96, where you absolutely did your job well, but just in general, you've had a great career, and you should be commended for that. I really appreciate you coming in. I know that you've done some interviews recently with
it's been craziness,
with the Tupac stuff, and I appreciate you telling the story and giving your honest. And I loved interviewing you that first time too. I hope we can do this again, and maybe next time. Don't talk.
Is there going to be a next time?
Well.